Hello and welcome to Friday Live. I am your host, Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer. This is our first Friday Live session for 2025. Happy New Year to all of my friends in Strata. We are heading out live, as we like to do on a Friday, to the Your Strata Property Facebook page. We're going out to LinkedIn. We're heading out to YouTube live as well. Hello. First week back for many of us in Strata. Some lucky ones I know are still on holidays. Next week might be the first week. I have been slowly easing back into things this week after a couple of weeks of not doing too much at all, as promised, resting and relaxing. The legal practice officially reopens on Monday, so we'll be straight back into it for 2025. I hope you too have had some time to rest, to recover after a massive year in Strata. And, I do recognize myself saying this at the beginning of each year. It's going to be another big year in Strata, and we are never disappointed. Always lots going on in our space, and feels great to be back here with you on a Friday. If you're coming in live, I can see lots of eyes there. As always, I'd love for you to say hello. If it's your first time tuning in on a Friday Live, give me a hello there. I know lots of people were perhaps researching, getting ready, preparing for their year in Strata. And we had a lot of new names, new faces following the page over the break. So special welcome to you. If you're catching the replay, as you are most welcome to do, I'd love to see your hellos as well. Sean O saying good afternoon and happy new year. Same to you, Sean O. Hey, Debbie, how you doing? Chew is here. Happy new year to you. Hey, Philip, great to see you. And hey, Petra, happy new year to both of you. We're going to jump straight into it this year. We are ready to go after a couple of weeks off. I'm going to swing around to this week's podcast episode, first pod of the year. That one was released yesterday. Let me know if you've managed to catch that already. I'm also going to have a look at some of the results from yet another impromptu, informal Facebook survey. I asked you last week, what's the one thing that you would like to improve in your Strata building in 2025? And, we pop those questions out there to you guys. I'm so grateful for you for playing along and letting me know your answers to the questions we might pose on the page from time to time. And sometimes I have a bit of an idea of what I think. You might tell me in reply what I think the temperature of the room might be. These answers surprise me. And what surprised me is we got one answer in particular many times over. The same message kept coming through in response to this question. What is the one thing that, if you could, you would improve in your Strata building in 2025? So I'm going to share with you what that one big priority seems to be for you all, those of you who have let me know. And I got a case for you. I know you love a case, and did a little bit of digging around earlier today thinking, I want to bring you a case for our first Friday Live of 2025. Get the brain working, get it fired up again after a break. I have a Victorian Tribunal case for you, case from VCAT. We've got a few members inside our online community who I know are from Victoria, more and more so, I have to say. I had somebody, I'm not going to out you, not going to reveal your details, but I did have someone reach out to me over the break who said, Amanda, we need you in Victoria. It is just nuts down here. So those of you who own properties in Victoria, I know you don't necessarily use the word strata, but you own apartments, you're in owners corporations in Victoria, you are more than welcome to be tuning in here. A lot of what we talk about, even though I am a New South Wales practitioner, is very relevant. I think everything we talk about is relevant right across the country, and we definitely have Victorian owners. We've got some Victorian managers in there as well in our online membership community who are getting some more direct one-on-one support each week from me there. So special nod to them today as I bring you a summary of an important Victorian Tribunal case that came down a few months before the end of last year. And I've finally had the opportunity to have a look at that. And it touches on this topic of access to records, access to owners' personal information. I know it's a juicy one for us, one that I in particular like to revisit, agitate a little bit here on our platforms. Yes, we're diving straight in for our first session 2025 into those controversial topics. More hellos and happy new year's coming in. I can see you there. Hey Kareem, hi Maureen, hey Brendan, Suzanne is here. Hey Josh, happy 2025 to you. And Stuart is also saying he's looking forward to this session. Thanks for talking us through this. No worries at all, Stuart. So that's what we are planning to cover today, hopefully within the hour. This week's podcast episode number 435. You might have heard me say, if you've had a chance to listen to it, it's been out for about 24 hours or so. You might have heard me say at the top of that episode that last year, towards the end of last year, we cracked 250,000 downloads of the podcast since we started podcasting. Huge number for a little podcast, and something that I think all of us should be really proud of. A little podcast dealing with a very niche subject, strata law, in this little country that is Australia. Lots of you tuning in, listening every week, downloading, listening to each episode tells me that this information, this education is essential. And it is numbers like that that drive me to keep delivering each week. This week's podcast was all about the top 5 each January. That's something that I do have the team look at the stats and the most downloaded episodes of the previous year and bring you the top 5 podcast episodes of the year before. So the top 5 of 2024, you're getting delivered to you this week, summarized in this week's episode. And I always say, if you're new to the podcast, or maybe you've been away for a little while and you're coming back to it and you just want to get straight into the nitty gritty, you want to listen to the hottest episodes, the most popular, the most controversial, maybe the episodes that are answering the questions that most people are asking in Strata, then those top 5 episodes. There's one in each January for the last 5 or 6 years or so, and you've got links to each of them under this week's episode. Go and have a listen to those, because they will direct you to those really great, popular, most helpful episodes of the podcast. Rochelle is back with us for 2025 and helping me out here today. Thank you, Rochelle. And she's just popped in to our chat here, that link to episode number 435. So head over and have a listen to that one. And thank you, Sean O. I can see your congratulations in there for over 250,000 podcast downloads. And that number really kicked up rapidly. We were sitting on about 200,000. I think maybe it was towards the beginning of the year, and ticked over that 250,000 towards mid to late last year. So that was a real ramp up. This audience here is really growing and really showing us that on the ground, what our government is telling us, what our researchers are telling us, that we have more and more people living in strata properties, more and more people with challenges in strata properties. I'm certainly seeing that play out, as I know my lawyer colleagues are seeing that play out, as we are busier than ever before, and more of you having more and more questions than ever before. So that's what I'm here for, to help guide you through this crazy life that is Strata. Hey Desert, Happy New Year to you. Josephine has given me a yippee because we're talking about Victoria here today. Yes, we are indeed. Special shout out to you, Josephine. Hey Margaret, lovely to see you here. All right, so some of you who may have been online last week, if you weren't lying on a beach somewhere recovering from New Year's, perhaps you might have been scrolling through and seen on the page that I asked a question. And I asked you to let me know one thing that you would like to improve in your strata building in 2025. What's that one thing? And 86 comments later, I think we're sitting at about now 86 comments on that post, all letting me know the one thing that you'd like to improve in your strata building. I've been able to identify a bit of a pattern here and some improvements you say you'd like to make that are very similar to others. There seems to be a particular priority coming through in the answers to this question. So I've pulled out for you some of the top comments, most popular replies to this question of what is the one thing that if you could, you'd like to improve in your strata building in 2025. I put them into my summary document here. And I think you might be able to tell with the first few that we go through what this common thread is in these answers. So Terry has said that she wants the Strata Committee or Owners Corporation to understand the Strata Schemes Management Act and to uphold their responsibilities in relation to repairs to common property. That's the one thing that Terry, if she could, would like to improve in her strata building in 2025. 26 thumbs up for that one from Terry. Then we've had Sean B, saying that owners have to have a better understanding of exactly what the real life costs are of correctly maintaining a strata building. We're noticing the similarity here. We want better understanding. We want to focus on repairs, proper maintenance of a strata building. Lots of people liking that comment from Sean as well. Meg's chimed in and said, if I could change one thing, it would be to foster a partnership mindset among all strata stakeholders by recognizing the formal arrangement of strata and the unique role each individual plays. We've got owners, managers, trades, NCAT. We can actually create a community that knows responsibility and transparency, reinforcing the partnership. So we've got Meg's talking about responsibility as well. Terry mentioned that. Meg's is also talking about transparency. What's starting to come through here is a real focus on understanding, on, if I may say, education, on understanding what your legal responsibilities might be in a strata building. This really surprised me when I saw these answers, very thoughtful answers coming through. It wasn't, I want to get rid of my corrupt strata manager. It wasn't, I want to replace the rusted on committee members. That was the kind of stuff I thought, treading carefully, we might get in response to a question, what's the one thing you want to improve in your strata building in 2025? No, it was deeper than that. These answers are inherently responsible, I'm going to say. We really want our communities, our owners, our neighbors, our clients for the strata managers who are tuning in to have a better understanding of what strata is all about. Recognizing, I think, that when owners have that better understanding, it is a far improved experience for everybody who's involved in strata. We didn't stop there. More comments along that exact line. Fiona saying owners understanding what strata ownership legally means, not letting things go because they don't understand, and not ganging up on an owner who provides free legal advice. So that's happening in Fiona's community. I'd be cautioning whoever that owner is who's providing free legal advice. As a lawyer and strata owner and committee member myself, that is an area that I know from experience we have to be very careful about wading into. But I pulled out Fiona's comment because she's really, again, as Megs and Sean and Terry were, tapping into this wish for owners to have a better understanding of what strata really is. Tracy's jumped straight to the bottom line here, education. Owners have to understand their roles and responsibilities and those of their managing agent. Lots of love there for Tracy's response. Petra saying communication among owners and understanding responsibilities. These words just kept coming in response to this question. Understanding your responsibility, meeting your legal obligations, communication, transparency. Transparency came up again and again. And I think the point was made, I think it was by Maury, in response to a few of the comments saying, yep, um, responsibility is great, understanding is great, but we can't get there unless we have transparency, unless we owners who are not perhaps on the committee, we owners who are not perhaps resident in the building, unless we have access to information and we have a committee that is operating in a transparent way and a strata manager that is including us in decision making, it's very hard for us as owners to gain that understanding. Completely agree with that as well. And Sean O, cutting to the chase as he does so well, simply saying understanding. We want more understanding in our buildings. So they were really the most popular answers to my question. What's the one thing that you, if you could improve in your strata building in 2025, what would that one thing be? And this very common thread about better understanding of responsibility, better understanding of legal rights and obligations. That's what we want in our communities. A surprise to me was not the answer that I thought I would see a lot of you coming back with. So that's why I wanted to bring that one to today's chat to point that out. I think it's a really nice positive start to our new year as well. I said that on this week's podcast episode with all of the media maelstrom that we had last year criticizing our strata managers. We still have, I'm happy to see, a focus on wanting to improve our buildings, wanting to recognize and stick to our repair and maintenance obligations, certainly recognizing that that is not happening, which is what you'll hear me talk about on this week's podcast. But we have that desire for change and that desire for improvement. Bill and Ben, how are you doing? Saying, where do we land when we understand? We understand must does not mean must, and that there's no cop on the beat. Well, there goes all my positivity. Thank you, Bill and Ben, out the window. Look, I certainly think that knowledge is empowering. Trite, perhaps, to say that, but certainly in my experience as a strata lawyer who sits on a committee, who assists many owners throughout the year, having knowledge and having an understanding is far better than fumbling around in the dark. It doesn't mean that your path ahead is smooth. It doesn't mean that you're not necessarily spending money on expensive legal fees or having to spend money accessing some support, but you are in a far better position when you have some understanding of the rules of the game than those who do not have that understanding. Ready Strata, how are you doing? Saying administration expenses can reasonably be estimated during the year, but maintenance expenses can only be based on guesstimates. Yep, that may well be the case. That is our summary of our, yet another, of our impromptu Facebook surveys. Love putting those out there, and sounds like you like them too, looking at the responses that we get. Thank you for participating in that. I am actually going to take some of this into my presentation that I will be delivering for conveyances. I'm going to be in Sydney next week, doing a little bit of client work, including this presentation. I've been asked to speak to a team, a national team of conveyancers. The company is called Dot and Cross It. Dot and Cross It, very clever name for our conveyancers. They have engaged me to come and chat to them about Strata in 2025. What are the key challenges for conveyancers? These are the people who are advising purchasers on contracts when they're purchasing their strata properties, vendors when they're selling their strata properties. What is it that they need to know about strata? That's a big question that has a very long answer, but I have narrowed it down to a few big things that I'd like to make sure our conveyancers are well aware of when it comes to advising on the purchase, in particular, of strata properties. It is such an important point in time for owners. It is often the first time that they are interacting with an advisor who may be able to give them a bit of foundation education in strata. Very few, in my experience, very few conveyancers or solicitors who are doing conveyancing, advising strata purchasers have a sufficient knowledge about how strata works. And there's a real missed opportunity, I think, there for that education piece to happen before the new owner gets into the building, before the new owner starts communicating with the committee, with the strata manager. So I love it when I get asked to do some education for conveyancers. And this has been really great timing, asking you guys about what is it that you'd like to improve in your strata building. I also put a question out there recently. What do you wish you knew? What do you wish you had known before you bought into strata? Looking back with hindsight is so valuable for those professionals who are advising at that point of purchase to understand what it is that when you look back, you wish you had been armed with, so that they can take that proactive step for their clients in the future to make sure that they're getting the right information, useful information about strata and strata property. And if I can do my bit to help with that, then I'm going to do it. Maureen is saying, would be good if people considering buying into strata were educated prior to purchase. Many come in having lived in a freestanding home and don't understand the difference. Yeah, I'm wondering if you posted that, Maureen, before I've said that I'm delivering this education for conveyancers. Completely agree. And that is the place where we can be doing a lot to be making sure that that education happens there at that point of purchase. Sales agents. Sales agents is another place where I think some misinformation, lack of good information is happening, and there can be improvements there. But unfortunately, our sales agents, in my experience, don't have a lot of incentive. There's not a lot of incentive there for them to get that piece right. They're there to get the best price for their client, the vendor. Often that means not knowing a lot, right, about what's really going on in the property to be able to sell for the best price. Maybe we don't want to know some of the things that are going on in the building, or be able to put our hand up and say, we don't understand. That's not a question for me. Pitching education to sales agents has been difficult in my experience. It's not a place where they really see there needs to be investment. I hope that changes. And, obviously I haven't spoken to every sales agent there is out there in the country. There would be agents with different views, I'm sure, who recognize the value of being educated in this space. But certainly there's huge incentive there for our conveyancers, those who are assisting the contracts for the sale and the purchase of strata properties, to be on top of things. Because if you think about it, if you've had a bad experience, if you bought a dud property, if you've gone into a strata building and thought, there's a special levy, the roof is leaking, I had no idea, I've got a horrible neighbor who is apparently in litigation with the Owners Corporation and has been for the last 2 years. How did I not know about any of that? The person you're going to be thinking of blaming immediately, I would think, is going to be the lawyer or the conveyancer who advised you on the contract. Why didn't I know these things? Why didn't you tell me these things? This wasn't in a strata report. Shouldn't I have known these things? Why didn't you tell me that I had the opportunity to do further investigations, to go and search the books and records? I think as a professional, if you've got happy, satisfied clients, then you in turn are going to be a happy, satisfied professional. That's how I feel as a lawyer. I want my clients to have good results. I want them to feel that the work that I've done for them has been beneficial, has put them in a stronger position than they would have been in otherwise. That is how I'm encouraging our conveyancers and other property professionals who are advising on these purchases to think about the work that they do. That if they are more informed, they are more educated about strata, then they in turn can provide that better service, have happier clients. Happier clients means repeat clients. They're going to buy and sell at other times in their life. They're going to encourage their family members and friends to buy and sell at other times. They know that you're reliable, that you know your stuff. They're going to come back to you. And that is a thriving professional, a thriving business if you've got that ecosystem in play. But it all starts with having that knowledge and having that experience, that helpful experience of strata. Heading over to those comments, Sean saying, I think many strata owners also need to remember how to communicate politely with others. Yeah, I think you might find people generally saying this. whether you're in Strata or not, remembering how to communicate politely with others is perhaps a bit of a lost art in today's world. Maureen saying some people just come in and start doing renovations without considering the difference in strata. Yeah, I mean, it's just nuts that that still happens. When we're heading towards, at least in New South Wales, 50% of residents will be living in strata. And what are we up to the next 10 years or so? You know, over 20 years, most people will be living in strata apartments. I mean, that basic 101 of I need permission when I want to do certain renovations, it just that understanding just needs to be there. That it's not is a failing in this system of property purchase, property sale. What is it? Why are we missing this consistently? Relaying this information. Mark is saying we see lease ads saying one space, nice and vague. Sometimes they say garage, one space. So, of course, they park in the visitor's car park. Yep, another really big issue. And this is where I'm saying sales agents have a lot to answer for here, I think. Vicky saying, I don't understand why strata committees are holding back on repairs when it might affect their property for resale if they don't manage upkeep on their asset. Yeah, it's a great point, Vicky, and it's exactly the reason why owners, investors as well. Investors, you might not be living in the property, but you would certainly think that you'd be thinking about your bottom line and how you are increasing your property value by investing in repairs. They might be banking on the fact that people who are then buying in are in the same position that they were in as owners buying in. They don't know anything. They don't understand. They don't do the due diligence. They don't search the records. They don't go and find out that there's nothing in the Capital Works Fund, that there's a strata loan that needs to be paid, that the lift needs to be replaced, that the roof is leaking, that the windows are leaking. These owners may be thinking, as long as we keep quiet about this stuff, don't put it on the records, then the purchasers are just as in the dark as we were when we were purchasing. So that may be an answer to why strata committees, or I'm going to say strata owners generally, Vicky, are not making that investment or are not willing to make that investment. They feel that it's better just to do nothing, sell, and move on. Certainly not the best long-term approach. Carolyn saying we have a renovation guidelines and application form, as a lot of strata agents do. We send it to the company requesting the 184 certificate and ask that it be forwarded to the purchaser so they're forewarned of potential issues and timeframes regarding renovating in strata. Love that, Carolyn. Great tip there from an experienced strata manager. So the 184 certificate is the certificate that a purchaser is going to request prior to the settlement of their purchase in New South Wales. And it simply has very basic financial information. What are the levies? What levies are outstanding? When are the levies due? Some other information needs to be included on there as well. So Carolyn's saying when we get that request for a 184, we know that there's somebody new coming into the building. If there's somebody new coming into the building, they may want to do renovations. We see that immediately as our opportunity to jump in and let them know, hey, this is how renovations work in this building. Don't come in with the jackhammers blazing. You need to make an application if you want to renovate. That's a really great process, Carolyn. I hope the other strata managers tuning in are maybe doing something similar, or that's a great idea for you to take on board. Brendan saying arranging a detailed and independent strata inspection report by experienced inspection firms should help solve the education issue. Vendor-driven online strata reports don't always provide all the right and transparent information, and agents often, unfortunately, push the latter. Buyer beware. That is a huge issue, isn't it, Brendan? And I know you and I have talked about this on the podcast. Huge issue. These appalling strata reports, vendor reports, we have to acknowledge them as that just have no information in them whatsoever. And we're starting to see a bit of this come out in the media now, where purchasers are turning around and saying, hang on, bought this property, didn't realize I was going to have to contribute $100,000 towards a special levy 2 weeks after I settled. I'm being completely blindsided by this. I've certainly contributed some quotes to journalists who are writing on that topic within the last few years, all comes down to not having these thorough reports, independent reports, as Brendan says. At the same time, recognizing that some purchasers don't understand the importance of investing, right? Some money in getting these reports, maybe engaging a strata lawyer to do the inspection for you because we know what it is that we should be looking for. And more importantly, we know what it is that's missing. That's really what you're looking for. What is missing from the records here, and what do we then have to ask for? But it's a cheap option, isn't it? When the agent says for $20, for $40, go online, click this button, pay this money, and you'll get a report that we've prepared, that the vendor has prepared for you. Definitely buyer beware. You don't want to be relying on one of those reports. And that is certainly, I was looking at my notes for next week's presentation, Brendan, that is certainly something that I am going to be sheeting home to the conveyancers that I'm talking about next week. Make sure you are telling your clients that they need to go and do their own inspection of the books and records. And of course, all of this needs to happen before the contract is signed, right? By the time we sign the contract, we're already committed to the property. It doesn't really matter what's going on. And that's a big problem as well, that often conveyancers and lawyers are getting these contracts and advising on these contracts when they've already been signed. And there's not a lot that can be done to protect purchasers once that's happened. Great idea, says Maureen, I think to Carolyn's idea there. Okay, John is suggesting some biannual strata hugging events to help build comradeship. Fair enough. John, let us know when that is happening. Send us the dates. Caroline's saying she sends that out with the intro letter to the purchaser. Yeah, I really hope that all of our strata managers have a nice onboarding, let's call it, process for their new owners, where they're getting a welcome pack, information about the building that they bought into. Those renovation guidelines are key to be including in that welcome pack. Sean M is taking notes. Stealing your ideas there, Caroline. That's what it's all about. Good to see you, Sean M, and glad that that is helpful. Brendan saying you're buying $1 million property, spending $40 on a strata report doesn't pass the pub test. Yep, you're right, Brendan. That's the mindset shift that we have to encourage people to take. Zlata saying that she was looking at buying a strata report for $149 from an agent, sales agent, I assume. So maybe the price has gone up there a bit. David, how are you doing? Saying key thing often missing in reports. I know because I get the information requests. No notices of meetings, just minutes. So none of the background documents. Yeah, very true. It happens with clients of mine, David, that come to me and say, Amanda, this meeting happened. Here's the minutes of the meeting. I'm always saying, that's great. Good to know the result of the motions, but it is the agenda that has all of the documents attached to it that help us understand what's going on in the building. It's got the engineer's report. It's got the contracts that we're approving at the meeting. It has the strata managing agents agreement that we're approving at the meeting. So yeah, so important to be reminded and to recognize that the agenda is often the more important document, while the minutes will simply tell us the result. Okay, Kyria saying, besides a solicitor lawyer, who can an owner use to do a search of records and costs? So there are professional strata records inspectors out there, Kyria. Brendan might want to chime in on that comment there. And certainly we have interviewed a few of those people on the podcast. Rochelle may remind me just to come back around to Kyria's comment there, and we can post a few of our podcast episodes on exactly that point. So Kyria can go and have a listen, and there's a few contacts there for you, Kyria. I see your note there, Brendan. Excellent. And indeed, Kyria, you can do it. A purchaser can do it. In New South Wales, as long as you are authorized by the owner of the property. So that means if you're a purchaser, you want the vendor or the vendor's agent to give you a letter saying you are authorized to go and inspect the records. In a market where there's a bit of competition, they want to sell the property, you would think that they wouldn't hesitate to give you that permission to go and search the records. As long as you are authorized by the owner, then you can make that appointment to go and search the records. Absolutely. If I'm buying property, I'm going to search those records. My family members are lucky to have me available. Amanda, can you go and do a strata search for us? So yeah, strata lawyer, professional strata searcher, or, I encourage friends of mine, colleagues of mine, if you're buying strata property and you're a reasonably intelligent person, you can read, you understand financial documents, perhaps, or you have someone you can take some copies and you have someone who can help you to explain and to understand those, then go and do it yourself. You are the person who has the most vested interest in that property. Excellent. Okay. So, quite pleased that we moved on to a discussion there about records and records inspections, because that is indeed the topic of the case that I would now like to share with you. As promised, and I got all of our Victorian audience, Victorian followers and members excited about this. I'm bringing you a case from VCAT, the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. It's a case that was handed down in October last year, towards the end of October last year, with all the hubbub of whatever else was happening around that time. And there was a lot happening in Strata around that time. It's not a case that I managed to unpack then and to bring to you, but a great one, I think, to start off the year with. I do have for you a copy of the case, which I'll share here on my screen. Don't worry too much if that's a bit small for you, because I will talk you through the key parts. And I'm actually not going into too much of the written decision in too much detail here. Helpfully, Rochelle has a link to this case for you as well. We've just put that into our chat here on Facebook. I think it's over on YouTube as well. That is the reported decision. So it is a reported decision. This copy you've got on the screen here is not the only copy. It is reported, and I think that's an OSLI link that you have there. So the case is St. John and the Owners Corporation PS 631843C 2024 VCAT decision. It was a single member, so not an appeal decision, and it's a case where there were lawyers involved. So when you read this 20-page decision, it's a little bit dense. You'll find there's quite a detailed discussion about legislative interpretation. You can probably skip over a lot of that unless you're a particular Strata nerd and would like to get into the weeds there. But essentially, the member has set out what the applicant's position was on the questions of law, what the respondent's position was, and then the member has said what their decision is. What happened in this case? The applicant, Simon St. John, wanted access to telephone numbers and also a fire safety report that the applicant knew was being held by the strata manager. The strata manager, with instructions of the Owners Corporation, had said, no, you can't have these documents, and the applicant proceeded to seek an order of the tribunal to release this information. So it was copies of mobile phone numbers and email addresses as well of each lot owner of the Owners Corporation, and fire safety reports that were kept by the Owners Corporation. And you'll see references here to legislation. I want to take you to that legislation because the Victorian legislation on this point is similar but a little bit different to the New South Wales legislation. So I found this interesting. Section 144 of the Owners Corporation Act in Victoria is the relevant section that says that an owners corporation must keep the following records. And there's a list there, kind of the usual stuff that we'd be familiar with, that the full name and address of each owner, the rules, which is the Victorian equivalent of bylaws, minutes, proxies, voting papers, correspondence, accounting records, financial statements, insurance policies, all set out there in section 144. The records have to be kept, depending on what they are, from anywhere between 12 months and 7 years. And section 146 is about the availability of records and how owners might get access to records. So this was a section that was really hotly contested in these proceedings. What exactly does this section mean? It says that an owners corporation, on request by a lot owner, must make the records of the owners corporation that are required to be kept under this division available to that person for inspection at any reasonable time, free of charge. That's different. Say our New South Wales owners and practitioners, any reasonable time, free of charge. That's a lot broader, perhaps a lot easier for owners in Victoria to get access to records. But it does say that it's records that are required to be kept under this division. The records required to be kept under this division are those records that are all listed here. I'm going back up to section 144. That list there, those are the records required to be kept under this division. They can be accessed at any reasonable time by Victorian owners, free of charge. What you might notice here is that this list does not include telephone numbers. It does not include email addresses. So the applicant here could not get access to these records under section 146 subsection 1. They couldn't get access to them at any time free of charge because they wanted email addresses, phone numbers, fire safety report. Those are not records that are in that 144 list. However, those records are listed somewhere else in the Act. They are listed in a regulation, Regulation 11A. I'm going to get to Regulation 11A, but before I do, I'm going to point out this other subsection here in section 146. While the Owners Corporation can make available certain records at a reasonable time free of charge, any other record, and that's these words here in subsection 2, any other record of the Owners Corporation must be made available on payment of a reasonable fee. So these words here, any record of the Owners Corporation, were the words that were argued about, I'm going to say, in these proceedings. Does that mean that they are different to the records that are in this 144 list? We can get access to the section 144 records at any reasonable time, free of charge. But if we want access to any record, perhaps any other record, is it the case that if we pay a reasonable fee, then we can get access? The applicant in this case said, yes, that is what this means. We can get access to any other records that are not in section 144 but are still records as long as we pay a fee. The respondent, Owners Corporation, said, no, even if you pay a fee, you still can't get access to email addresses, phone numbers. They are just not records that you are allowed to access. Telephone numbers and email addresses are mentioned, as I said, in the regulation. They're in Regulation 11A. The Owners Corporation must keep the following records: the telephone number and email address, if any, of each lot owner. They also have to keep records of any homicides, if known, which have occurred on the common property. Fair enough. They have to keep dates of any gas safety check, electrical safety check, pool barrier compliance, details of any outstanding recommendations for work to be completed from gas and electrical safety check, notices, orders, declarations issued by surveyors or public authorities about building defects. So just that list of 5 things has been separated out of section 144, has been put in the regulation as an additional record. So these are not records that you can access in Victoria at any reasonable time and for free. The argument in this case was about, however, can you access them if you do pay a fee? Do they fall into this section 146 subsection 2? Are they one of these any records? Do they fall within this definition of any record of the Owners Corporation? Because the Owners Corporation must keep them. They do exist. Telephone numbers and email addresses, those records are there. If they're there, can we pay a fee and inspect them? And the short answer, quite short, given by the tribunal, was yes. Victorian owners, you can access telephone numbers and email addresses that must be kept by the Owners Corporation as long as you pay a fee to access them. And the fee in Victoria, similar to New South Wales, is a statutory fee. It can be no more than what the regulation says it can be. On my calculations, I think it's sitting at about $15 or something like that, $15 or $16, and then additional fees for photocopying expenses. But against the respondents' good, I think, very good legal submissions, the tribunal found that Section 146, subsection 2 means what it says. If there's any record of the owner's corporation that is not otherwise listed in this 144 list here, then you can pay a fee and you can access those records, including telephone numbers, email addresses, fire safety reports that may be held under 11A of the section. I'm just going to scroll down to, yes, there is an interesting section in the Victorian legislation, which we don't have in New South Wales, that says a person whose name or other personal information is kept in the records of the owner's corporation or on the owner's corporation register may apply to VCAT for an order restricting access to that information. Wow. That's unusual to those of us in New South Wales. That's something that maybe we would like to have the opportunity for that in New South Wales, to be able to restrict access to personal information. You've got that opportunity in Victoria. I was reading a few articles that were written by Victorian practitioners when this case came down, and they said, well, we've got Section 172. That's nice, but owners still have to go to the tribunal. It's on them to go to the tribunal to protect their personal information. That's probably not good enough. In New South Wales, we don't even have this right. And as you will have heard me say before, the Privacy Act protections don't apply where we have the Strata law that compels an owner's corporation to give access to personal information. And we have tribunal authority in New South Wales that says that Strata law overrides the Privacy Act protections. In Victoria, you have the opportunity to go to VCAT and seek an order saying, I don't want my personal information to be released. Got to be on the front foot about that, however, because as we've seen in this case, the primary position, the starting point, is that personal information can be accessed, including telephone numbers and email addresses, in Victoria, as long as you pay a fee. I'm going to scroll right down to the end because there's an important, I think, paragraph here from a, what am I going to say? A certain point of view, I suppose, that the tribunal member is putting forward here, which I thought is maybe instructive and a neat way to think about how we deal with personal information in Strata. Tribunal member has said, in conclusion, given that the common property in a plan of subdivision is collectively owned by the lot owners as tenants in common, it is entirely consistent and logical that there is, in the Owners Corporation Act, a presumption in favour of access to any record of the Owners Corporation for the persons identified in that part of the Act via the copying of any record for a fee. It is entirely consistent and logical, says this member, that owners should have access to any record of the Owners Corporation because we are talking about a property that is collectively owned. So often I am told, it is put to me, often by strata managers. You would have heard it put quite strongly by Rena Van Alst, my good friend and co-host of the podcast. And Rena is quite passionate about this. Why should owners have access to your personal information? Why should your neighbor be able to access your telephone number if you don't want them to? Why should your neighbor or the person who lives 20 floors above you be able to access your email address if you don't want them to? I think this paragraph here is an answer, part of an answer to that question. We are talking about property that is collectively owned. We are talking about an exception. At least the Privacy Act says this, an exception to your right to privacy for your personal information. I know that's hard for so many to get comfortable with. It's something that personally I have always been comfortable with. Having said that, my mobile number is on my website. I get emails. I get spammed. My email inbox gets spammed all the time by, the likes of Domino's Pizza and Anaconda and whoever else's email address, email database I might end up on. If that happens, they're going to my junk. If there is a number telephoning me that I do not recognize, that number does not get answered. That is how I deal with my personal information, let's call it, email address, phone number, being out there in the public domain. I can set those boundaries for myself at my end, and I'm comfortable doing that. What I've heard from other owners is they either don't know how to do that or are not comfortable doing that. It may be that as we get more comfortable with technology and our understanding of how we can set these boundaries for ourselves, and the easier it is for our personal information to be accessed, then those attitudes may begin to change. But for now, it is incredibly important that Strata owners realize that they understand that if their phone number, if their email address is on the Owners Corporation's records, then definitely, by law, absolutely, it can be accessed by other owners who may be inspecting records. Certainly in Victoria, certainly in New South Wales, that is what these cases tell us. Now, in New South Wales, there has been some discussion, a proposal even. There was at some stage some draft legislation proposed, but never went or hasn't yet gone before Parliament, to the extent that we may be able to redact, or owners corporations or strata managers may be able to redact personal information from records to be able to address this concern about owners. That proposal hasn't made it to the bill that is currently before New South Wales Parliament. It may turn up in later amendments, proposed amendments. I'm not sure. Certainly in New South Wales, we don't have the opportunity that owners have in Victoria to seek an order from the tribunal that our information be removed, our personal information be removed from the record. I find that interesting that that does exist in Victoria. But I've said in my email this afternoon when I was inviting you to this session that I find this is an instructive case to map across to our New South Wales legislation, because we certainly have this same requirement in New South Wales to make available for inspection any record, and that was the word in the Victorian legislation as well, any record that is in the custody or under the control of the Owners Corporation. That's the word in New South Wales. Any record in the custody or under the control of the Owners Corporation must be made available for inspection by an owner who makes that inspection request. That is in section 182 of our New South Wales legislation. We do have that. So we do have that all-encompassing, any record that is being held must be made available for inspection. That's the same in Victoria. What we don't have in New South Wales is a strict requirement to keep telephone numbers and email addresses unless those are the addresses for service. An owner must give an address for service that has to be listed on the strata roll, but as Rena Van Alst has pointed out to me, there is no requirement to obtain or to keep telephone numbers. That is correct, and that is different to the situation in Victoria. But I say if a telephone number is provided to a strata manager, and I think very often they are, telephone numbers are at the bottom of most people's email signatures these days. If a telephone number is provided, then it is sitting there on a record of the Owners Corporation. That email that's being held by the strata manager becomes a record of the Owners Corporation, and it can be accessed. You've just heard me say section 182. An inspection of the Owners Corporation's records must include an inspection of any record under the custody or in the control of the Owners Corporation. That's going to include records that have telephone numbers on them, records that have email addresses on them. So while it might not be as direct as the Victorian legislation, it is, in my view, certainly the case that in New South Wales, owners who are carrying out records inspections do have and should have access to records that will then have email addresses and telephone numbers, could then have email addresses and telephone numbers printed on them. Okay. Lots of comments I've seen out of the corner of my eye coming in, perhaps about this case, but I know you well, perhaps about other things that I may not be talking about. So I'm going to wade through some of those and see if there's some questions there that I could answer for you. Sean M is going back to our records inspection, saying I would walk away from a purchase if they don't give permission. So if the vendor's agent doesn't give permission to inspect the records of the owner's corporation, that's a red flag. Absolutely agree. And that's a good rule of thumb there, Sean. Bill and Ben saying, last time I looked, there's no required qualification to be a professional searcher and write reports. A house pest and building report in the burbs is $500-ish. If your strata report is 40 or 140, you're likely getting what you're paying for. Yeah. I do think, Bill and Ben, that those who carry out strata inspection reports perform these searches, whether or not you want to call them professional searches. I think they are charging much more than $40 or $140. I think these $40 reports are coming through this click and download process where the vendor or the vendor's agent has just had a report prepared and it's made available to anyone who wants to pay that money on realestate.com or wherever it is you might download those reports. Someone's talking about Mexican for dinner. Sounds good. Margaritas. Okay, Russ, how you doing? Nice to see you. Saying, note that authorization to inspect the records does not give you an entitlement to ask questions of the strata manager or receive any kind of tuition. Yeah. If you do not understand strata to start with, then gaining access to the records may not help you understand the situation the building is in. It would be better to use a competent strata searcher inspector. Cheap report providers often subcontract to people who are not competent. Yeah, love that. Great comment. Thank you, Russ. A good example of this was somebody who came to me, new purchaser, heartbreaking situation, young couple, new baby, and they were hit with a $100,000 plus special levy, small building. They just did not know that it was coming. And they said, Amanda, who can we sue? You know, whose fault is this that we didn't know? And I gave them some advice, having looked through what it was that their conveyancer had advised them, what was in the strata report. And I looked at the strata report and it actually had in it, it had financials that had a line item for a consultant. That was all that it was, a line item for a consultant, but it was huge. It was something like 50 grand on a consultant. And I know, as some of you will know, having been in the space for a long time, understanding what certain line items might really mean in strata financials, an alarm bell went off for me and I went, that $50,000 on a consultant, if I was acting for you as a purchaser before you signed that contract, I would have been saying, what is that for? That looks like an engineer. It looks like they're getting some advice on a big project that might be coming up if you're paying that much to a consultant. Could also have been lawyers. Sometimes I know lawyers' fees get hidden as consultants' fees. That would have been a red flag to me, but probably only to me as a strata lawyer who understands this. So exactly to your point, Russ, you often don't know what you're looking for, and to be able to go through each line item and to be able to pull out those red flags, it does take skill, it does take experience. And it was cold comfort, let me say, to be telling these poor people, look, if you'd got some different advice at this point, then that might have been enough to tip you off that there was something big going on and you needed to ask some different pointed questions. The person who advised you, not experienced in strata, didn't know this. And as far as I could see, there were no laws that were broken here. There were no disclosure obligations that had been breached. So there really wasn't anything that these people could do about it. Okay. Scrolling through these comments here, Bill and Ben's going, why only homicides on the common property? It's a good question, Bill and Ben. I think that's a disclosure obligation of sales agents as well, isn't it? Maybe somewhere in the Property and Stock Agents Act, the sales agents have to disclose if there's been a homicide on a property because people don't want to buy a property where that's happened, understandably. Maybe some other things that might happen on a property that you wouldn't want to buy, like a smoking neighbor or a barking dog that might be next door. They might be good things to disclose. Of course, that's the kind of information I'm talking about that you're really only going to have a chance of accessing if you go and do that strata search and start reading meeting minutes and reading emails. Steve James saying changes to the act I would like to see in 2025. That's a good question to post on the page, isn't it, Steve? Let's start collating those ones, perhaps. Um, Keep going through these sections, see if there's anything else to pull out. Bill and Ben's suggesting that Section 172 in the Victorian legislation does say exceptional circumstances. Yes, so that's the test. If you want your personal information in Victoria to be removed from the record, then there will need to be some exceptional circumstances. Don't know enough about that one to be able to suggest what those kind of circumstances might be. Setting up a specific email address for Strata, yep, that's definitely something that's often suggested if you don't want owners, neighbors, all and sundry to be able to contact you. As I said, it's never been something that's bothered me. Plenty of companies decide that they can just contact me. They get shunted into the spam or promotionals tab in my email. That's how I deal with them. If I had an owner who I felt was harassing or a neighbor who I felt was harassing with their emails and I didn't want to see them, I would be telling them to stop emailing me. If they continue to do so, they will simply be going to junk and I will not be receiving their emails. That's the way that I deal with it. Okay. Lots more comments coming through there. We are out of time, but I'm going to look forward to scrolling back over those, I think, a little bit later. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me here for our first Friday Live of 2025. I always wonder if, have we got enough to talk about this week? Am I going to be giving you enough detail to be able to keep you interested and help you out for the week? We are always somehow able to find enough Strata excitement to top off our Friday afternoon. And I'm grateful to you for that, for being here and for joining in on all the fun. Have a great weekend in Strata. I've got a few big weeks coming up. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear about some travel that I have coming up. I will be in my Sydney digs next week and will be coming to you live again next Friday. I will look forward to that. Have a great week. Till then, thanks for joining me and I'll catch you all next time. Bye for now.